Well, actually, we had a great social life on Hubbard Street. Bill, who was tremendously shy, um, came out of his shell when he'd had a drink or two, which was a good thing, bad thing. Um, and we had some wonderful friends. I think perhaps beyond all other friends we had across the street, Tim and Phyllis Warren, and they were just wonderful. They had three children, and their boys were younger than my boys, but their daughter and Pookie were exactly the same age, and when they were quite young, um, they looked a lot alike. I remember being at a skating party, and Tim said, "I've been yelling at the wrong kid all afternoon," um, which was not exactly true, but typical of Tim, who was he was a sweetheart, and his wife was also a sweetheart. We were just very lucky to have them. And they were always there when we were in need. This, um, in, Compared to their easy flowing life, there was always something going on at the Andersons. I mean, for instance, we had two tragedies: the tragedy of Bill's hands, and then also the tragedy of Kenny um, coming around that corner in Lincoln, and a truck with no lights, no warning lights, was parked on the side of the road, and he glanced off to the left, but not far enough, and the two girls, both of whom were sitting on the right of the car, died as a result. That was pretty awful. Bill's accident was horrendous. And the Warrens just were right there for us every minute of the way. They just it was a lot of it helped us get through those terrible moments. Um, but aside from that, we had there was at that time, sort of in the maybe I would say the '60s, a lot of really talented musicians, amateur musicians in Concord, and there was always a get together. Anywhere there was a piano, they would come in, and there would be somebody. Jeannie Kelly would play the piano, and Sandy McCone would hold forth on some reed instrument I can't remember, and then Gene Kelly's husband played a trombone, no, a trumpet, and 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 a, and, a, and there and drums, and there was always somebody on. There was always enough of a combo so that the music was fantastic. So occasionally we had them at our house, and then they were at other people's houses, like the Beans. Cliff Bean used to play the bass, which was taller than he was. And Sandy McCone, as I say, just various people, really a lot of fun. Music and dancing and my jinx, I guess. I don't know. And Bill was right in the middle of it all the time. He loved listening to the music. He wasn't apt to get up and dance unless he'd had a little bit too much to drink, and even then, his dancing was always very subdued. But he really loved to be in that kind of a group where everybody was doing something, and even if he just sat there and took it all in through his eyes, he was obviously enjoying himself. Libby was is a very interesting, she's a very interesting kid, person, now woman. She's got more talents. She's got more talents. She's got a broader range of talents almost than anybody else in the family. And she told me in no uncertain terms when she first got to high school, she said, "Don't expect me to go to college because I'm not going to go to college." And so I had a pretty good idea that that was not going to happen if she didn't want it to happen. And but it did turn out that she was a wonderful equestrian, and I started looking for equestrian schools that she could go to, and it turned out there was an excellent one in England, out on the Bristol Inlet, and in Somerset, and wrote to them and found that they would be happy to have her as a student, and she seemed to think that would be a great idea. And so Harry and Rose, my mother and father, and I took her to England. I think it might have been the first time I went to England, I'm not sure. But anyway, we took her to Porlock, and she settled right in, and the letters that I got from her seemed to confirm the fact that she was in the right place and that she was learning something that would be useful to her. And then I think somewhere along the line and my mother and father had stayed in England, and they were planning on taking her on a tour of the continent in between her fall and her spring semester. And so right about Christmas time, she showed up at the front door at Hubbard Street, and I said, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "I'm through, I'm home." Well, it turned out that her love of the time at that time was playing around with somebody else, and she came home to reassert her position in his life, and I think for a while that sort of worked, but then he disappeared from her life, and so there she was, sort of halfway trained, but it didn't stop her. She immediately got a job working in a stable, and then eventually got a job running a stable for a wealthy person who had a private stable in I think Connecticut. And then when she finally got tired of doing that, she went into merchandising. She went in as a store clerk, first at the country store, and ended up running one of the Talbot stores before she got married to a person that she had met who was a horseshoer. I think there's a word for that. But
Farrier.
Anyway,
Farrier.
oh, he's a farrier. That's right. And a very lovely guy, actually, very lovely and sweet, and very shy. And Bill was wonderful about all of this. I think we are talking about Bill. We just got a little sidetracked with Libby, but Libby has had an interesting life. So and also Bill at that time, all during his children's being educated, somehow or other we managed it. I don't know how. And then when they were all educated and we had a little extra money, we started to do a little holiday traveling. We went to the Bahamas because he bought a piece of land down in the Bahamas. I don't know whatever happened to it. We did have a deed for a piece of land down there. And we had friends who had a place in the Bahamas, and we would visit them. And then I think it came up that we were going on a walking trip to Norway, and he said, "No, we're not going to do that." And I said, "What do you mean? You said once that you would never go overseas till you went to Norway first." "Well, that's true." I said, "Well, so that we're going." Well, we had an absolutely fabulous time. He loved every minute of it. Norway has a marvelous system of trails that in the summertime are walking trails, and in the wintertime are cross-country ski trails. and we went to the Jotunheim and the Hardanger, which is both mountainous areas between Oslo and Bergen, and I can't say enough about that particular kind of a holiday, because you can travel in several different directions from any one of the huts. It's like a web, and that huts are not in the sense hut as we think of it, but really more like a little rustic hotel with marvelous smorgasbords at breakfast that allowed you to also collect some stuff for your lunch on the trail. So it was, it was just a great thing. He loved that, and he always loved it when he got there. He fussed and he fumed, and why am I doing this, and grunt and grumble, but once he got on the airplane, he would just relax and realize, okay, I'm here, I'm committed, so I might as well stop being a grumble about it. So, and he was wonderful. We went to Norway. We went on the walking trip, another walking trip in Wales. We went to Italy. So we had a pretty wonderful life, actually, in many ways, considering that we really started out with a real struggle. But stop to think about it, we got our kids educated, and up until he got very, very sick in the 80s, we had a wonderful life together. And as I say, he was a great guy, really great.
Yeah. Now there were two things about living at Hubbard Street. There were activities, and one was the country club. I don't know how Bill thought about that. And the other thing was the sailing club,
Oh yeah,
which
the
were the
sailing
two
club.
kind of activities with those kind of people.
Well, I think that for Bill, the biggest interest in his life, since we were not in any position to buy a big sailboat, was what was the name of those boats that
A yacht? What do you mean?
the boats that we had?
Sailfish.
Sailfish, right. We were asked to join the Sailfish Club, which was the best thing that ever happened to Bill. He was a born sailor, and I guess he must have gotten that when he was a boy and went to a camp every summer in Lake Winnipesaukee. But he just loved that, and it was a wonderful group of people. They were from all over the lot, socially, and he just fit right in. First of all, because he was good. He was good, and people appreciated the fact that he really knew what he was doing when he got at the helm of a little tiny sailfish. And it was great because there were a lot of different people in the Sailfish Club. A lot of them had parents who had places up on the ocean. Some had places on lakes. So it was all summer long. It was just one thing after another, and just a great experience. Just a great experience. He loved it. And then one of the interesting things that happened to him was we were invited by Rusty and Romy Everdell to come down because they had bought a new sailboat, and when Bill was talking to Romy, Romy said, "You have to come down and sail." So the day that was arranged that we were going down to Duxbury, Bill was doubled over with a back, spasms in his back, which is something that he had periodically, and he was almost totally incapable of standing up. But he said he didn't care how he felt, he was going to go willy-nilly for his date with Romy. So the two of us got in the car, and we drove down to Duxbury, and Romy didn't make any mention of the fact that Bill was obviously a little bit hobbled, and they got in the sailboat, and the thing that Bill had to do in the sailboat, and I'm not exactly sure, I don't know what the name was, but a wire came down from the top of the mast and attached to something around his back so that he could be ballast when the sailboat was way over on its side, and so that was his job when they got out into the ocean. And when they got back, Bill's back was completely cured. Whatever that attachment was, it had pulled his vertebrae apart from one another, and so that we went on that evening to some cocktail party where I met for the first time Margie Arnold, one of the dearest people in my life, and also I also had no idea at all that Romy and I would eventually end up being married to one another. So it was a confluence of some pretty wonderful people. And it was a great success for Bill. Great success.
What about the Concord Country Club?
Well, Bill wasn't all that wildly interested in the Concord Country Club. He was not the least bit interested in golf. Every once in a while, I'd get him out on the course in one of these mixed tournaments, but his heart wasn't in it. He was much happier after the tournament was over and we could sit around and drink. That was a sort of a good thing, bad thing in his life, although I don't ever consider that he was a drunkard. But he would drink a couple of martinis and he would be a most affable, funny guy. And he had a wonderful sense of humor. It would come creeping out at those times. And so he always had a good time at country club parties, dances. Everybody liked him. He always had somebody that was willing to either dance with him or sit at the table and talk with him. So he never felt lonely or because of course I was out there dancing with anybody and anything, or even all by myself, because I loved so much. I loved dancing so much.